linear edges and kind of detail that I don't even have to plan.
What type of wood blocks are you using?
This is a birch veneer plywood.
Okay.
So I just can buy a 4 by 8 foot sheet and then chop pieces off of that as I need it. And I have size. I like it because I can work any size I want, and it's accessible material. Although you know of all the problems that come with plywood. Splinteriness, hollows on the inside that you don't know until you're printing, wood grain that can be haywire. Sometimes I can't carve it because it's going this direction. It keeps me more honest. It keeps my marks more honest. Then back to this notion of perfection. I think that it makes more interesting kind of marks and edges and things that add something to what I do. The wood is bringing something to the collaboration, and it makes my marks look a little more unusual, a little more rugged. A third thing happens than all the efforts that I can do here in drawing. So I kind of like that accidental interaction that the wood is going to do. And again, it keeps my works from looking too perfect or too precise. What are some of those other words? Too refined. It makes me struggle. And that struggle is where I'm learning more about what I want to do and how to make things happen.
So now I'm seeing how this new thing is happening. So I'm gonna do.
But I use mat board also. I use plexiglass. I use tempered masonite. All of those kind of press boards.
It was shower, bathroom,
well,
shower?
Well, if you go to where they sell
it's like
material
for the wall.
Yeah,
okay.
It's plastic for the shower.
Okay.
And see, it's nubby on one side,
Yeah.
which is probably what you put on the outside.
Okay.
But then there's this
And you use this
So
against your wood?
Right. If I
Otherwise
use
you'll
this,
get
I'd
that pattern.
texture. Yes, I always do bleed prints. I think it's an aesthetic thing that I end up evolving for a long time, and you get to come to things like to make the print that I did just make them become incorporated. It just seems more interesting to me. I use my tracing paper to make my stencil shapes, but I don't do everything. I select certain parts, and it's a pretty small print, so maybe 2 or 3 areas could work for the stencils. Here I cut lots of holes. They could potentially each be a different color, which could be a little crazy. Here there's 2 main shapes, but I might still have different kind of ink applications that happen with it. On the back side of my stencils, I like to do reinforcements because I'm just using cheapo brown paper, and I don't want to go to something more fancy or expensive, so maybe my cheap student days are still coloring my choices. But I've been real satisfied with just using the brown paper, and if I can reinforce stress points with a little masking tape on the back, not to make the stencil thicker. In fact, I don't want it to be up against the edges, just along the bridges. Helps to make the stencil hold in place a little bit, and I've had the paper stencils last for editions of up to 50. If I want to do more, I could cut another stencil. It's just paper. Or I let it dry overnight, and it gets a little more sturdy, especially if I'm doing a long run that I can't finish in one night. Here, this is stencil B that's going to block B, and then I just make a couple anchor points to be able to tape it down, and I actually make registration marks that fit this stencil, just so that I can reposition it back. The classic thing that my students end up doing when they're making their stencils is they make them too small, or the same size as the block, so that when they get to these kind of areas, they have a little thin strip out here. So I make mine real big, and actually I really wouldn't even need this section here because it's going off of the edge, and it's going to be a bleed print. But this large enough stencil ends up making a support for it. So here's a bridge again. This little area might need enough of a strip. But I'm not making very big additions, so I don't have to worry about the stresses. And my whole thinking is that I can always cut a new piece of paper if it rips. And then I'm not that committed to the stencil. If I decide I don't need to use it, it's only paper. I can throw it away. If I modify it, I don't feel like I've wasted a whole big piece of Mylar and not used it. Okay, so a couple registration marks here. So I'm really ready to go to 2 blocks. Put color on both blocks. So in some ways, this gives me the opportunity to explain why the 2 blocks have become so interesting. For years I used 1 block register and did all my registering and reduction from 1 block. And that tradition I think is wonderful. It's kind of the core of being an efficient printmaker, I think. The logic of doing it is there. You have this block, you might as well go through it and use it and mine that block with even more information that gets layered. But it presents a lot of problems, as some of you who've done reduction know. The first problem is that that first color is underneath everything, if you do it in the traditional reduction way. And if you start off with yellow, then yellow's underneath everything. You don't get a blue, you don't get a red, because it's always being affected by that undercolor. So early on is when I started doing the stencils, even on the 1 block reduction, as a way to isolate colors and put them in different patches and have a chance to have more color sit against the white of the paper. Then I get more luminosity, and I still do the reduction and stack colors up, but they're not always being affected by that first color. They're affected by a variety of first colors. But then going to the 2 block method has really opened up things even more, in that I feel like with this preparation of the 2 blocks, I haven't carved anything away. Think of that. It's subverted the very first rule of reduction printing, which is to carve away what you want to stay white. So I haven't done that. It's somewhere or the other, if I choose. So now all of this becomes my choice about do I need it or not. The whole questioning about the potential that's inside each block really becomes a very interesting game for me to play. And then moving back and forth between the 2 blocks, I can work on this one, then I can print this one, and the decisions on a reduction print can be anticipated a little bit more, because the proofing here could affect what I'm doing here. I could backtrack. I could change this depending on what this one is doing. Now I don't do that too much, because I still work pretty much forward. Do this one, get them done on all my edition, then go to this one, get that done on all the edition, and then go to this one. So I go backwards and forwards all the time. I try not to favor one block over another. They're both part of the whole thing, but eventually sometimes some areas are on one block and I never use them, but they're there.
My question is, because you're kind of doing experimental and you don't really necessarily know what colors you're going to do, like on top of the edition that you're trying to go for an edition of, let's say 25, how many extra do you normally print just to play around with colors or ideas?
I have maybe as few as 4 extra pieces of paper. I don't like to do a whole lot of proofing ahead of time. So if I'm trying to get an edition of 20, maybe 4 pieces of paper. And then if the edition is 18, it means I struggled and I couldn't make up my mind. If the edition's 16, then I might have 7 APs that are all different and struggled with. Although, partially I like the proofing process as the evolutionary growth.